Well, welcome back to Two Pastors and a Mic. My name is Shannick,
And I'm Corey.
and we're so thankful that you're joining us wherever you're listening or watching from. Just
What
know we so appreciate
We
you.
do. I told you I'm not going to be able to get through that segment without laughing.
No, it's all good. If you haven't already, make sure you
Do
leave a
it.
review. I think we did get
got a
a
bunch.
review, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't already, what are you waiting on?
Do
Reach
it.
out. And if you're not listening on Apple Podcasts, you can always just email us, text us, reach out to us in any capacity that you
Any.
can, and let us know how this podcast has been maybe encouraging you or inspiring you or ticking you off in this season if we're really challenging some mindsets.
Yeah, specifically because we've been talking about marriage this whole month again in the States. Welcome all you from the Netherlands and Europe who have been joining us over the last month. It's crazy what happens when you start talking about a really loving God. So that's fun. Welcome.
fun.
Hopefully that really loving God has impacted your marriage to be a really loving husband or wife, father or mother, or whatever it is going on in your life, whatever season you're in. Remember, the goal of why we've been doing this is to become more patient and kind. That's the secret, patient and kind. If we were more patient and kind, I think our marriages, our relationships would be in a way better place. And so this is part 3 of how to thrive in marriage. We're going to talk about something that I'm actually not super familiar with. Just learned about it over the last year. I've been really hyped about it. But before we do, this
Yeah.
has been the week from
I
hell.
was going to say, speaking of what's going on that
The
you mentioned,
week from hell.
how you doing?
I am not well. In fact, my wife and 2-year-old got sick, and this is on the recording of this is day 5 of them in bed, sick with fevers that have not broke. Julia finally got to the doctor. It was flu type A. They say it's been kicking people's butts, but I've never seen her this sick in our marriage. Zion's been freaking me out at night. I haven't gotten like 7 or 8 hours straight. It's been a rough week. I've been losing at my kids. We had a snow day, so then sicknesses. I've been home a lot trying to work from home. And if you're a parent who works from home, I need like 2 to 3 hours at a time of in the zone. I haven't gotten that at all. So everything is sporadic.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. Of course, we also had to cancel Sunday service at
I know,
Hill City. And as this podcast is being released, we will be under another winter weather advisory with potential
Oh yeah.
couple inches of snow up to 6 to 8 inches of snow. We have no idea.
So as you're
gonna be
listening
wild.
to this in Southern Indiana, you might be snowed in Wednesday morning. So
Yep.
welcome. Hopefully you're like, I'm done with this. Get out of my house. I lost it on my kids recently, so I apologize. I don't know who I'm apologizing to because I need to go home and apologize to my kids because I yelled at them. So that's where I'm at. I'm not okay in the head. And thank you for letting me use the first 2 minutes of this podcast to vent and get that out of my system. But for all other news, I'm a sports fanatic. No one else cares about this except for our Canadian friends and a handful of Northern American friends.
Hey, before you say this, I actually did not watch the game, but I heard about this game
Oh my gosh.
already.
I hate that you didn't watch it. It was on ABC. But Team USA beat Team Canada in hockey for the first time, and I think, I don't know, maybe ever, as adults. Now, the Americans have dominated World Junior over the last several years, but as adults, we have never beat
Really?
the Canadian in my known lifetime when I was paying attention. I don't know. So I went to school and played hockey.
I was going to say, is your friend Dave Canadian?
Yes, he is, and he listens to this podcast, so you can give him a nice little chirp. But I don't want to speak too much, and I know we have a lot of our friends following us in from Canada.
Yeah, Vancouver
Yes,
is one area.
and so I don't want to rub it in too much because we still have the gold medal game on Thursday night, which would be tomorrow night if you're listening to this when it is released. But it was one of the greatest hockey games ever. You're talking about 2 of the most talented countries. Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, maybe the best player ever, plays for Team Canada. And USA won 3-1, but the game started with
With 3 fights.
3 fights in 9 seconds.
That's what I did watch the highlights of.
And I was on the phone with my brothers watching it, and I was on the phone with my college roommates, and that was just nuts and electrifying. Was not expected at all, and it just got me in a great mood. So
I wish I would have watched it after seeing the highlights of the fight, number 1. Number 2, I'm going to go ahead and say this and put it on record. Last year, I went to a Tampa Bay Lightning NHL game.
Your
And I
first
will
one?
say, first time ever at an NHL hockey game. I will say that it was the most fun I've ever had at a sporting event in my life.
And you've been to all of
And it
them.
wasn't even close. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just the atmosphere. It could have been that I was in Florida with some warmer weather.
But no, Tampa's got a really
But
good hockey city, and they have the Lightning.
It
and they're
really
amazing.
was packed out on
Yeah.
a random like Tuesday night or something. It was so
Hockey
good.
is amazing. I had friends texting me and be like, I'm watching this because why not? It's on ABC. And they're like, they're allowed to do this? I'm like, oh, yeah. So
Yeah, and you said, don't expect any fights. Dude, there were like 2 fights in that game.
3.
No, I meant whenever I went to that Tampa Bay Lightning,
yeah.
I was talking to you about the game to prep myself for what to expect. And you're like, yeah, all the stuff on TV, there's usually not any fights. And there were even 2 fights that night.
Yeah.
So that was
They've
fun.
the game has shifted. I like the fights. It kind of polices it themselves. It prevents, the reason for why there's fighting in the game, I have to tell people this, is it prevents the best players from getting cheap shotted. They're like, oh, that's why there's referees and put them in the penalty box. No, that happens, yes. But if I'm going to take a cheap shot at the best player, before I do that, I'm thinking, well, crap. If I do this, I'm going to have to fight, and it prevents people from doing it because there's a lot of people that don't want to fight, especially a guy who's only there to fight. So you're going to or you're going to think twice before you try to give a cheap shot to one of the better players.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of fights, let's keep that with hockey and not in marriage, even though we know there is fighting in marriage. But we're going to learn to fight fair in marriage. But remember, one of the things that we're doing throughout this month is looking at, in our marriage, how to be patient and kind. Those are the 2 things that Paul wrote down when he was talking about what love is and what love is not. The 2 things that love is it's patient and it's kind. And within this, we've talked about, or we're going to talk about, 4 things that we need to know in order to have a marriage that is full of patience and kindness.
Yeah.
The first week we talked about the 5 love languages. Last week we talked about knowing the myths.
Yep.
And this week, what are we talking about?
We're talking about love styles. Now, this was new for me. I learned this. Big shout out to your mom, Pastor Linda Bannett. She introduced me to this last year. I took the test. I really liked the language. I'm going to be giving a lot of information that I've learned from it over the last year. You can go to howwelove.com to learn the 5 love styles. And the reason for why I love this so much is because the love styles shape how you relate to others, because it's influenced by how you grew up, your upbringing. And so I want to be very clear. These love styles are not labels. This is not who you are. It just describes the way that you coped as a child. So these are not your personality. They explain how you were shaped by those you grew up with. And so your love style helps you understand how your childhood experiences inform what you expect from relationships, specifically your marriage, how you receive and express love, and then how you respond to others in stressful interactions, again, in the context of marriage. So knowing your love style gives you a starting point from which you can grow and become a secure connector. That's the goal of these love styles. So you'll see, we're just going to kind of read them off. I really encourage you to go take the test. It's really helpful. Again, this is not who you are. It's how you interact with your spouse today based on how you grew up. And I think that information
and some of those experiences.
Yeah, it's really important for us to know this, because oftentimes we're triggered by things, and it's not so much the issue at hand, it's what that issue at hand brought up from childhood.
Wow.
So they're really cool.
Right. And before we go in this, you said you're going to encourage them to take the test. They can do that at
howwelove.com.
howwelove.com.
Yep, the 5 love styles. You ready to go through them?
Gotcha. Let's go. The first love style is the avoider. Avoiders come from homes that are often low in affection, but place high value on independence and self-reliance. Avoiders grow up taking care or learning to take care of themselves. To deal with the anxiety of having so little comfort and nurturing from their parents, they have learned to restrict their feelings and suppress their needs. As adults, then, avoiders can seem emotionally distant or unengaged.
Yeah.
Which is a huge, I think, sometimes problem when people go into counseling or therapy. They talk about how their partner or their spouse seems distant.
Hey, Mike Tyson.
And obviously they potentially might have the avoider love style.
Yeah. The second one is the pleaser. Pleasers usually grow up in homes with an overly protective or angry, critical parent. Pleaser children do everything they can to be good and avoid troubling their reactive or anxious parent. These kids don't get comfort. Rather, they spend their energy comforting, caretaking, and appeasing parents and siblings. So then, as adults, pleasers tend to continually monitor the moods of others around them and try to keep everyone happy. Eventually, they can become resentful, but rarely know how to express their own difficult emotions or ask for what they want.
It's big.
It is big.
The third style is the vacillator. The vacillator is someone who grows up with an unpredictable parent. Vacillators' needs then aren't top priority. Without consistent parental affection and attention, they develop feelings of abandonment. By the time the parents feel like giving again, their child is tired of waiting and too angry to receive it. As adults, vacillators are on a quest to find the consistent love they never received as children. They idealize relationships, hoping to avoid any feelings of rejection or abandonment. Life isn't ideal, and as a result, they often feel disappointed, angry, and let down.
And number 4 is the controller. Controllers need control to keep the vulnerability, painful feelings they've experienced during childhood from surfacing. Controllers need to control to keep the vulnerable, painful feelings they experienced during childhood from surfacing in their adult lives. There we go. I know how to read. Having control means having protection from the overwhelming feelings of fear, humiliation, and helplessness that they had to endure as kids. Anger is the one emotion that is not vulnerable, so intimidation and anger are often used to stay in charge. Control may be highly rigid or more sporadic and unpredictable, but controllers rarely realize the real reason they need to be in charge. They rarely have compassion for themselves and as to the suffering they endured as children, and therefore minimize the impact of their childhood trauma and its effects on their adult relationships. I deal with that probably more than anything in one-on-one counseling.
And then the last style is the victim. In chaotic homes, compliant kids survive by trying to just stay under the radar. They hide, appease, and learn to tolerate the intolerable. At times, they may disconnect or not fully be present in order to lessen the pain caused by their neglectful, angry, chaotic parents. Some kids build whole imaginary worlds in their heads where they can escape the pain of abuse. As adults, victims lack the sense of self-worth and are often anxious, depressed, and just going through the motions. They may replicate their childhood home environment by marrying a controller and using the same coping methods that they learned as kids, which were compliance and retreat, just to get along in the marriage.
Isn't that crazy? And so when I learned about these, I was like, man, this is really good language. If you're curious more, you can go to howwelove.com, take the test. But identifying your style and your spouse's style can uncover a lot of hidden dynamics within your marriage that can be avoided once you know the language or once you understand why it is you are triggered or respond to certain events. Again, the goal isn't to necessarily be like, oh, we got to go head on to overcome or change our love styles. No, the goal is to become a secure connector, which takes time. Secure connectors are comfortable with I can't say that word. Littering and anyways, secure connectors are comfortable with balanced giving and receiving in relationships. I can't say it. They can describe strengths and weaknesses. Are you still trying?
No, I wanted to make sure I get it because it's funny.
I don't know how to say it.
Reciprocity.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
It doesn't even sound right. They can describe strengths and weaknesses in themselves and others without idealizing or devaluating. Good at self-reflection, secure connectors clearly and easily communicate their feelings and needs. Resolving conflict was modeled for them growing up, so they know that they're not perfect and can apologize when wrong. They know how to set boundaries and when to say no. They are comfortable with new situations, can take risks, and delay gratification. When upset, secure connectors seek help and comfort from the person rather than a thing. And so, again, I'm learning more and more about these. I thought that this was the reason why I included it in the ebook and we took a podcast to talk about this is because sometimes when you know about a lot within the counseling world, but then there's new language that give somebody something to identify with so that they can focus on it. That's really cool. And so I know that probably less than 1% of people listening to this podcast are going to take this test.
You said 0 before the podcast,
But
by
I
the
wanted
way.
to give a benefit of a doubt. But if you were listening to us read some of these things and you're like, oh man, that sounds like me, I would encourage you to take the test. It's a free test, and they have a lot of resources for people to better themselves. And again, this is the goal of why we're doing this, is to help you thrive in marriage, not just survive. And sometimes you need to be aware of how and why you get triggered, and unpack some of our childhood traumas that are causing a lot of the tension within our marriage, because we're seeking something that has been void for 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 years. That's the goal.
Yeah, and it's a big step. Matter of fact, it might be the biggest step just to become aware
Yeah.
of some of the things that either you have experienced, or knowing what your spouse has experienced in their childhood, in their love style, if you will, so that you can better process and bring healing to them and process with them.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, share it with your spouse. Maybe take the test together. Maybe have a really good conversation, get vulnerable with each other, and see what kind of sparks the relationship. I hope you had a great time last week at Jeff Ruby's for Valentine's Day. We hope you had a great Valentine's Day, whatever it is that you did. We hope that your marriage has become more patient and kind. And with that, just know you're loved, and there's nothing you can do about it.